She was sitting alone at the edge of the wedding, the clink of champagne glasses echoing around her, when a little girl in a purple dress wandered up clutching a stuffed animal. "I can't find my daddy," the girl whispered, and for the first time all night, Charlotte forgot about her wheelchair. Then the man appeared, scanning the room with relief in his eyes, and everything shifted. Charlotte Ashford sat at the edge of the ballroom, her chair angled slightly away from the center of the dance floor. It wasn't that she wanted to hide, but she had learned over the last 3 years that vantage points mattered. From here she could see the swirl of gowns, the flash of cameras, the soft flicker of chandeliers. All the things that once made her feel included but now reminded her of how different she looked in a crowd. Her wheelchair was sleek, polished, designed to blend with the formality of the evening, but she knew the truth. People's eyes rarely slid past it without hesitation. At 34, Charlotte commanded Ashford Industries with confidence most executives twice her age struggled to muster. Yet here, among old college friends and their spouses, her voice and authority didn't matter. She was Jessica's guest, not the CEO. And as Jessica laughed with her new husband across the room, Charlotte felt the familiar pinch of distance that no couture dress or practiced smile could erase. She adjusted her posture, her hand lightly brushing the wheel rim, a subtle habit she had developed when nerves coiled too tightly. She could already imagine the unspoken reactions circling the room, the polite smiles that didn't reach the eyes, the whispered reassurances of "she looks so good considering," or worse, the complete avoidance. Since the skiing accident, she had become fluent in other people's discomfort. She had also become selective, choosing solitude over the exhausting task of managing their awkwardness. Tonight, though, she had refused to decline Jessica's invitation. Jessica had been there when the world seemed too heavy, sitting through hospital therapy sessions, sending late-night texts when pain blurred the edges of sleep. To honor that kind of friendship, Charlotte could endure one evening of being the quiet figure on the sidelines. Still, as the music swelled and laughter rippled across the room, she felt the sharp edge of invisibility. Champagne glasses clinked, sequins shimmered, couples moved in rhythm. She watched, wishing for the ease she once had, before she was reduced in so many eyes to a symbol of tragedy dressed up in elegance. Charlotte exhaled slowly and reminded herself, "I chose to be here. For Jessica. For myself." Yet beneath the resolve was a whisper she didn't often admit aloud, the fear that maybe she would always be apart from the life happening in the center of the room. And then she noticed a small figure at the edge of her vision, a child standing alone in the crowded space, clutching a stuffed animal like a lifeline. The little girl hovered near Charlotte's table, the crowd moving around her like a restless tide. She wore a purple dress and clutched a soft, well-loved stuffed animal close to her chest. Her eyes were bright but uncertain, the look of someone who has realized the room is too large and her hands are suddenly empty. Charlotte angled her chair a fraction toward her and softened her voice. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" The child nodded, relief flickering over worry. "I can't find my daddy," she said with the calm seriousness Charlotte had seen in children who trust that adults know what to do. "What does your daddy look like?" Charlotte asked, scanning the sea of suits and boutonnieres. The girl lifted her chin. "He's very tall and has dark hair. And he wears the same suit as all the other daddies." The description made Charlotte smile despite herself. "That does narrow it down, just not as much as we hoped." She shifted a little closer to the table's edge, making room with an instinctive courtesy. "My name is Charlotte. What's yours?" "Lily," the girl said, as if trading names made them teammates. She hugged the stuffed animal tighter. "My daddy is the best daddy in the whole world." The statement landed with such simple conviction that Charlotte felt her chest warm. She remembered how, before the accident, rooms like this had felt easy, navigable. Now she measured distance differently, in exits, in eye lines, in pockets of safety. And yet with Lily here, the ballroom seemed to shrink to a manageable circle of conversation. "May I keep you company while we look?" Charlotte asked. Lily nodded and hopped, carefully, into the empty chair beside her, placing the stuffed animal on its own folded napkin as if introducing a third guest. Charlotte laughed softly. Excellent manners. They played a quiet game of search. Together, they tracked tall men with dark hair as they crossed the dance floor, paused at the dessert table, stooped to greet relatives. Each time Lily shook her head with certainty. Not him. Charlotte admired the decisiveness. Children, she thought, accept reality without decorating it. It was adults who tangled themselves in explanations. Lily examined the wheelchair with candid curiosity. Does it go fast? She asked, not unkindly. Fast enough, Charlotte said, smiling. But I like to go steady in rooms like this. Lily considered that. Steady is good, she pronounced, and then lowered her voice conspiratorially. Big dresses are everywhere. Charlotte bit back a laugh. They are. For a moment, Charlotte felt what she had missed for months. Being approached without pity, being met simply as a person who might help. She didn't have to manage anyone's discomfort. Lily had none. If we don't find him from here, Charlotte offered, we'll walk over to the doors and try from there. Deal. Lily nodded solemnly, as if sealing a contract. They were about to begin a second circuit of scanning when Charlotte noticed a figure cutting through the crowd with purpose, eyes searching at the height where a small child might be. Relief ran ahead of him, visible in the looseness of his shoulders and the way he quickened when he spotted the purple dress. He reached them and dropped to one knee. Lily, he breathed, there you are. Daddy, this is Charlotte, Lily said, already proud of the solution. She helped me because I got lost. The man's gaze lifted to Charlotte, direct, grateful, unhurried, and held there. Thank you for staying with her, he said. I'm Michael Torres. I was looking everywhere. His words were clear, his attention complete. He spoke to Charlotte as if her chair were a detail, not a definition. Something eased in her that she hadn't realized was braced. I'm Charlotte Ashford, she replied. Lily's very capable company. Michael smiled, the kind that starts in the eyes. I can see that. Around them, the ballroom kept moving. Music, laughter, the shimmer of celebration, but within their small circle the air felt calm, steady. Charlotte realized she no longer felt on the edge of the evening. With Lily's simple trust and Michael's measured warmth, she had been invited back to the center of it. Michael remained crouched at Lily's level for a moment longer, his hand brushing back a loose strand of her hair as though confirming she was really there. Relief softened his face, but it wasn't frantic or panicked. It was the steady composure of a parent who had trained himself not to alarm a child. Charlotte noticed that detail immediately. He didn't scold or scowl. He simply gathered his daughter into a quick, grounding hug. You scared me, kiddo, he murmured, his voice pitched so only she could hear. Lily's response was practical. I wasn't scared. Charlotte helped me. She leaned into her stuffed animal as though to prove she had been in safe hands all along. Michael looked up then, meeting Charlotte's gaze fully. She braced for that flicker she always anticipated, the half-second when someone's eyes darted downward to her chair, then back up, trying to mask discomfort. But it never came. His focus didn't waver from her face, and what she saw there was simple gratitude. Thank you, he said again, his tone more deliberate this time. You didn't have to stay with her, but you did. Charlotte shook her head. It was no trouble at all. We were scanning the room together, narrowing down the options. She allowed a small smile. Although her description, tall with dark hair and a suit, applied to half the guests here. Michael chuckled, an easy sound that drew the tension out of the air. Yes, that's my Lily. Precise in her own way. He rose to his full height, confirming at least part of Lily's assessment. He was tall, broad-shouldered without looking stiff in his suit, carrying himself with the kind of relaxed confidence that made formal wear seem like everyday clothes. Charlotte was suddenly aware of her own posture, of how she often adjusted herself in her chair when meeting new people, trying to command the same authority she did in boardrooms. But Michael didn't make her feel as if she had to compensate for anything. His presence didn't ask her to prove herself. I'm Charlotte Ashford, she offered, extending her hand. His grip was firm but careful, the kind that conveyed respect without condescension. Michael Torres, he replied, and I can't tell you how grateful I am. He slid into the chair beside Lily, creating a small triangle of connection between them. Lily, still clutching her stuffed companion, leaned happily against his arm. Daddy, Charlotte says steady is good, she informed him solemnly. Michael raised an eyebrow in amusement. Does she now? Well, I suppose she's right. Steady is what gets us through. The remark, simple as it was, landed with Charlotte in a way she hadn't expected. Steady. It wasn't pity, it wasn't forced optimism, it was acknowledgement of balance, of choosing a pace that worked. She felt her chest loosen just a little. They talked in the easy rhythm of strangers who sensed they wouldn't remain strangers for long. Michael explained that he had come alone with Lily after a last-minute babysitter cancellation. "It's just the two of us most nights," he said, his tone neither apologetic nor boastful, simply factual. "I work at Children's Hospital, pediatric nursing, so she's used to tagging along when things shift suddenly." That explained the calm, Charlotte thought. The way he had approached Lily with reassurance first, not reprimand. It also explained the quiet patience radiating from him now. He knew how to be present, to notice small signals, to read a room in ways most adults overlooked. "I hope you don't mind me saying this," Michael added after a pause, "but the way you handled Lily, most people would have just pointed her toward an usher. You made her feel safe instead." Charlotte felt warmth rise, unexpected. So often, her interactions in public were reduced to others' discomfort, their eagerness to end the encounter. His recognition touched something raw. "I've always enjoyed talking with children," she said carefully. "They tend to see more clearly than adults. No filters, no awkwardness, just questions and honesty." Michael nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "That's true. Kids adapt. It's adults who trip over what they think is different." Charlotte held his gaze a moment longer, realizing that, in the span of only a few minutes, the weight she carried into the ballroom had shifted. She wasn't the isolated guest anymore. She was part of a conversation that felt natural, a triangle of presence: Michael, Lily, and herself, woven together not by obligation but by choice. The reception swirled around them, music rising and falling, laughter spilling from clusters of friends, waiters weaving between tables with trays of champagne. Yet Charlotte no longer felt pressed against the edges of the evening. With Michael and Lily settled beside her, the ballroom seemed to narrow into a space that felt comfortable, even welcoming. Lily, perched proudly in her chair, swung her feet beneath the table. "Charlotte," she asked suddenly, "does your chair have buttons?" She leaned forward with the unabashed curiosity only children carried. Charlotte smiled at the directness. "Not buttons exactly, but wheels. See these here?" She tapped the polished rims with a fingertip. "When I push them, the chair goes where I want." She demonstrated a small roll forward and back, the motion graceful, practiced. Lily's eyes widened. "That's cooler than buttons," she declared. "You steer yourself like a ship captain." Michael laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Leave it to you, Lily, to compare everything to an adventure." He turned to Charlotte, his expression open. "I hope you don't mind her questions. She has a way of seeing people without hesitation." "I don't mind at all," Charlotte answered truthfully. "In fact, I appreciate it. Most adults don't know how to ask without wrapping their words in discomfort. Children just ask." She paused, considering. "It's refreshing." Lily rested her chin on her stuffed animal and studied Charlotte. "I think you could race people," she announced. Charlotte let out a laugh, surprised at how natural it felt. "I'll keep that in mind," she teased, "though I suspect I'd have to practice first." The conversation drifted easily after that, moving from Lily's favorite storybooks to Michael's work at the hospital. Charlotte listened as he described his patients with warmth that softened the technicalities. "Children notice when you take them seriously," he explained. "They're sick, yes, but they're still kids. They want to laugh, play, be treated like themselves, not like their diagnosis." Charlotte found herself leaning in, drawn to the steadiness in his voice. She recognized in him the same resilience she had built after her accident, the determination to live fully, even when circumstances shifted. "It sounds like demanding work," she said quietly. "It is," Michael admitted. "But it's meaningful. And Lily reminds me why it matters." He ruffled his daughter's hair, and Lily giggled, batting at his hand. The small exchange carried a tenderness Charlotte hadn't expected to witness tonight. Her thoughts drifted inward. For years, she had measured social gatherings by what they cost her: the effort of pretending, the energy of hiding her unease. Yet here she was, part of a conversation that didn't drain her but filled her with something she hadn't felt in far too long: inclusion without condition. Lily suddenly clapped her hands, breaking Charlotte's reflection. "Daddy, I have an idea." She leaned closer, eyes sparkling with mischief. "I think you and Charlotte should dance." Charlotte blinked, startled by the suggestion, while Michael's cheeks colored faintly. "Lily," he began gently, "not everyone likes to dance." His tone carried that patient caution parents used when redirecting a child. But Charlotte's heart gave a quiet leap. Dance, something she hadn't dared since the accident, something she had quietly mourned. And here, in this unexpected corner of the wedding, the possibility had been spoken aloud. She surprised herself by saying, "Actually, I'd love to try." Her voice was calm, but inside, a rush of nerves and anticipation surged. Michael turned toward her, his expression shifting from surprise to recognition, as though he understood exactly what she was risking by agreeing. He nodded slowly. "Then we'll figure it out together." Michael rose from his chair with a kind of quiet certainty, extending his hand toward Charlotte without hesitation. It was not the hand of someone offering pity, nor the exaggerated gallantry she had endured at corporate banquets. It was simply an invitation, as natural as breathing. Charlotte hesitated, her fingers hovering above his. The ballroom stretched before her, polished wood floors, couples swaying to a rhythm she had once known by heart. Before the accident, she had loved dancing. She had even taken lessons during college, savoring the freedom of movement, the pulse of music guiding her body. That part of her had been shelved, wrapped in silent grief. Until now. "I haven't danced since," her voice trailed off, caught between fear and possibility. Michael's eyes held her steadily. "Then tonight, we'll redefine what dancing looks like." Something in the steadiness of his tone gave her courage. She placed her hand in his, surprised at how grounded the simple contact felt. He guided her chair gently toward the edge of the dance floor, navigating through the crowd with the ease of someone who respected space. Lily skipped behind them, her purple dress fluttering like a banner of encouragement. "I'll be your teacher," she announced, as though appointed by fate. They reached the floor, and Michael crouched briefly so his face was level with hers. "We don't need steps," he said softly. "Just rhythm. Let me follow you, and you follow the music." The band played a mellow waltz, the kind designed for gentle turns and fluid sway. Michael placed one hand lightly on the back of her chair, the other still holding hers. With the first beat, he guided her forward, then to the side, the wheels rolling in graceful arcs. Charlotte felt the unexpected smoothness, the chair moving as if it, too, belonged to the music. At first her breath came shallow, each movement a question. But Michael adapted instantly, finding patterns that didn't strain, gestures that included her fully. Soon it felt less like improvisation and more like a language spoken between them, each turn an affirmation that she was part of the dance, not an exception to it. Lily clapped her hands and twirled in small circles nearby. "Perfect," she called. "Daddy, dip her." Michael laughed, his cheeks tinged pink, but he obeyed the spirit of the command, leaning close, dipping his head toward Charlotte's shoulder as he spun her chair in a playful arc. For the first time in 3 years, Charlotte threw her head back and laughed freely, the sound rising above the music. Around them, other guests paused. Some watched with admiration, others with awe, but for once, none with pity. Charlotte felt the shift in the room. Michael's unself-conscious acceptance had reframed the entire moment. They weren't a spectacle. They were simply two people sharing joy. The song slowed, and Michael let the chair come gently to rest, his hand still warm around hers. Charlotte realized her heart was racing, not from nerves now, but exhilaration. She had expected this wedding to be another exercise in endurance. Instead, she had rediscovered something she thought was gone forever, the possibility of belonging, of beauty, of grace. She looked at Michael, his face open and kind, and whispered, "Thank you." His answer was just as quiet. "It's not a thank you. It's a beginning." The music shifted into something livelier, but Charlotte and Michael lingered at the edge of the dance floor, catching their breath. Lily twirled nearby until dizziness toppled her into giggles on the polished wood. Charlotte couldn't stop smiling. Her hands still tingled from the sensation of being led, not managed. Michael stood close, one hand resting lightly on the back of her chair. He didn't seem to notice the way people glanced at them now, admiration in their eyes instead of unease. His gaze was fixed on Charlotte, steady and unhurried. She recognized the flicker of nerves there, though, like a man calculating the risk of a leap he knew he had to take. "Charlotte," he began, his voice lower than before, almost carried away by the swell of conversation around them. "I know this might sound forward, especially since we just met tonight, but I don't want the evening to end without asking." He hesitated, then gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Would you, sometime soon, have dinner with me? The words hung in the air, unvarnished, vulnerable. Charlotte felt her heart lurch. For years, invitations had come in two forms. Networking obligations thinly disguised as social, or well-meaning, but pitying gestures that left her emptier than before. This was neither. Michael wasn't thanking her for helping Lily. He wasn't fulfilling an imagined duty. His expression told her plainly. He was asking because he wanted to know her. She studied his face for a beat longer, noting the way his jaw tightened slightly, as if bracing for rejection. And then she realized that in the space of one evening, he had done something extraordinary. He had made her feel not like a symbol, not like a survivor to be applauded or an obstacle to be tiptoed around, but simply a woman. I'd like that, she said, her voice steady though her chest swelled with emotion. Very much. Relief and delight broke across his features in equal measure. He nodded once, the kind of nod that signaled both gratitude and promise. Good, he said softly. Then it settled. Lily bounded back to them, her cheeks flushed. Did you see? She cried, tugging at Michael's sleeve. You two danced. You're supposed to dance again. Michael chuckled, crouching to scoop her into his arms. Maybe another time, Lily. Tonight, we'll let this one be special. He glanced at Charlotte, his eyes holding a glimmer of something both cautious and hopeful. Charlotte felt the corners of her mouth curve into a smile that reached all the way inside. Special. Yes, tonight had been just that, and the promise of more lingered like music that refused to fade. Dinner turned into coffee, then into evenings at each other's homes, and gradually into a rhythm that felt less like newness and more like recognition. Michael didn't storm into Charlotte's life. He entered it the way he had approached the dance floor that first night, steady, deliberate, without hesitation. They found comfort in the small rituals. Sunday afternoons meant Lily sprawled across Charlotte's living room rug with crayons, while Michael read aloud from one of her picture books, his voice animated enough to make Charlotte laugh. Weeknights sometimes meant Michael arriving late, still in scrubs, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and exhaustion, but with a smile that softened the fatigue. You wouldn't believe what a 4-year-old said to me today. He'd begin, and Charlotte would listen, absorbing the humanity threaded through his stories. In turn, he listened to her, not to the polished version of her CEO persona that colleagues admired, but to the vulnerable truths beneath it, the loneliness of boardroom triumphs, the weariness of being admired for resilience instead of simply being seen. Strength comes in many forms, Michael reminded her once, pouring tea in her kitchen. The way you keep showing up, even when the world expects you to hide. That's a kind of strength I admire more than anything. What surprised Charlotte most was how easily Lily accepted her presence, folding her into daily life without ceremony. When Michael invited Charlotte to join them at the park, Lily didn't hesitate to ask, "Will you push me on the swings?" And when Charlotte agreed, Lily clapped as though it were the most natural thing in the world. There were no awkward pauses, no explanations needed, just inclusion. Charlotte, who had once dreaded gatherings, began to look forward to these moments. She realized she wasn't guarding herself from stares or whispers. She was laughing, answering Lily's questions, listening to Michael's stories, and offering her own. The barriers she had once carried like armor began to dissolve in the steady current of their companionship. 8 months in, Michael sat with her in the accessible garden she had designed at her home, a project she had poured herself into as both therapy and solace. The air was fragrant with late blooms, lanterns casting soft light over paths lined with carefully chosen plants. Michael's hand found hers, and his voice, when it came, trembled with sincerity. "Charlotte, I need you to know, I love you. Not because of what you've been through, not despite it, but because of who you are. Your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. The chair, it's only one detail." Her breath caught. She had imagined such words countless times, always with the fear they would be patronizing or hollow. But here, with Michael's eyes holding hers and Lily's laughter echoing faintly from inside the house, she believed them. "I love you too," she whispered. "And I love how you and Lily have shown me that my life isn't defined by limits, only by the people I share it with." In that moment, Charlotte realized the accident had taken much, but it hadn't taken the possibility of being seen, desired, and cherished. Michael and Lily had given that back to her, not as a gift of charity, but as a natural extension of love. The ballroom looked almost identical to the night Charlotte had rolled to the edge of its floor and braced herself for invisibility. The same chandeliers sparkled, the same polished wood gleamed, the same strings hummed softly above the murmur of guests. But tonight, everything was different. Tonight, she wasn't the solitary figure watching from the shadows. She was the bride. Her dress had been crafted with intention, a gown that flowed elegantly whether she was seated or standing, designed to honor her shape, her presence, her dignity. The fabric shimmered under the lights, not to disguise the wheelchair, but to complement it. Charlotte wheeled forward with steady confidence, every detail a declaration. She was not diminished, only transformed. Beside her, Lily danced ahead in a swirl of lavender tulle, scattering petals as the flower girl. Her laughter carried across the room like bells, untamed and joyful. Guests leaned in to watch, smiles blooming. And waiting near the altar, Michael stood tall in a classic suit, his gaze fixed on Charlotte as though no one else existed. The steadiness in his eyes was the same as it had been the night he'd first offered his hand. SD 114091. When the vows were spoken, Charlotte felt each word settle deep into the foundation of their story. She thought of that evening 2 years ago, the isolation, the small child clutching a stuffed animal, the nervous father who had looked at her without flinching. She thought of the dance, improvised and imperfect, but radiant with possibility. And now here they were, binding their lives together in the very room where it all began. At the reception, Charlotte and Michael returned to the dance floor. This time there was no hesitation, no question of whether she belonged. Guests circled them with admiration, but Charlotte hardly noticed. Her world had narrowed again, the way it had that first night, to Michael's warm hand and Lily's delighted voice. Together they moved to the music, her chair rolling with practiced grace, his steps adapting in seamless harmony. Lily spun nearby, her purple dress echoing the one she had worn the night she got lost and found Charlotte. Charlotte felt her throat tighten, overwhelmed by the symmetry of it all. What she had once feared would be a life lived on the margins had instead expanded into something fuller than she had imagined. A partnership built on respect, a family stitched together by trust, and a love born not in perfection, but in vulnerability. As the final notes of the song drifted away, Michael leaned close, his forehead resting gently against hers. "Can you believe," he whispered, "this all started because Lily wandered off?" Charlotte laughed softly, tears threatening her mascara. "Sometimes the best things come when we stop hiding," she replied, "and let ourselves be found." The guests erupted in applause as they kissed, but Charlotte barely heard it. All she felt was the weight of Michael's hand in hers, the brush of Lily's dress as she spun between them, and the quiet certainty that she had discovered what she once believed impossible, a love that saw her, wholly and without condition, and chose her anyway.